Tom Martin, and welcome to another episode of A San Francisco Conservative, the new podcast series featuring yours truly, Tom Martin. I'm a lifelong journalist. I've produced stories for ABC News, NBC Today Show, CBS Sunday Morning, CNN. I even covered the White House for a year for the Nightly Business Report on public television. And during all that time, I've grown fond of meeting interesting people and having stimulating, thought-provoking conversations. And that's exactly what we do on this podcast series. Thanks to my co-host, author David Parker, who joins us each and every episode from San Francisco. David is the author of 3 excellent books, which I highly recommend: Income and Wealth, A San Francisco Conservative, and his new book, Rome 476. Hi, David. How are you today?
Hello, Tom. I'm fine.
Great to see you. Great to see you. I'm excited to talk about the new book. You know, we first started working together some time ago when you were preparing your first book for publication, Income and Wealth, and you made the important point that income and wealth are not the same thing, and that we can learn a lot from that distinction. And your second book had that playful title, a San Francisco Conservative, which I always thought was kind of like a unicorn or something, but there you are in San Francisco. So I guess they do exist. And
I'm the only one. I'm the only one.
Okay, I do believe that. I do believe that. And then of course you carefully chose the title of your latest book of essays, your third book of essays, Rome 476. Why did you choose that as the title for your new book?
Well, when I realized why Rome fell in 476 and how important that was the end of Western civilization, which was a little spark in the history of mankind. 5th century Athens says human beings have rights. A leader or a group of people or a community can't tell individuals what to do. That's a big step in the history of mankind. And Rome, 1st century, was another great period, and that was really reinforced with even better law. And then 476, the Huns and the Visigoths and the Vandals and all those crazy guys came into Rome not with swords, with sledgehammers, and smashed the city, the center of the universe in a way, to smithereens, and the Roman soldiers, the strongest military in Europe, didn't lift a finger. I thought that was amazing. Didn't lift a finger. And so the question is, why? They hadn't been paid. Why? All tax revenue, and there was a lot of tax revenue, went to pay interest on the debt. Nothing left for any social service or for the military. And they hadn't been paid for a while, and it says, we're not going to go risk our life. You're not going to pay us. And civilization fell. When I started to write Income and Wealth, our national debt was around 30 or 29 trillion. It's 33 today, I believe. I just saw a statistic. And we're not going to fall. But why not? We could.
Yeah.
So a wake-up call. My book's a little bit of a wake-up call that we're pretty sloppy.
Sure. Yeah, no, again, being a kind of a news junkie, I'm always paying attention. What are the headlines of the day? What is CNN telling us right now, and that kind of thing. And it's very easy, and probably very easy for so many of us here in the U.S. to kind of lose any sense of context about challenges, one nation against another, where the economy is headed, and so on. And that's why it's been so powerful for me to read your books and read your essays, because you provide that context. And why is that so important? And why should more people? I know right now we really want to get your books into more schools, into the hands of more students, and so on. Why is that context so important?
Yeah, you said what I was going to say next, that there's nothing new. We're seeing an invasion of Ukraine. That wasn't that long ago. We did that in World War II. And we're seeing Israel and Hamas. They've been doing that for 70 years. They've been doing that for 100 years. There's nothing new. And it'll resolve and things will go back to normal. And so why don't we look at history a little bit? Our debt, we're so strong, and because we can print our own currency. If we were a euro country and we had the euro, we can't go print euros. But we have the dollar. It's our currency. We can just, like an old teacher in school in the 1970s on a mimeograph machine, you can just keep running out more dollars and pay off the debt. We can do that. So we're not going to fall. And plus, if things got really bad, everybody would take a little cut, maybe in Social Security, a little cut in Medicare, and we would solve our problems. We're not going to fall. But it's so sloppy, and there's so much precedent. There's so many great historical examples for everything that's happening. And the commentary and the discussion and the resolution of all the problems we're having today were done better in the past, with more insight on a higher level of discussion. The world, or especially America, is at a very low civilizational point, except for science. Yeah. But the level of conversation among citizens is very low, and nobody knows it or appreciates it, and I'm bringing that to people's attention also.
Very, 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 very important. I was really surprised to learn, and I don't remember learning this in school, to be perfectly honest, myself. But I think it was the library in Alexandria you've told us about, and just in terms of what knowledge, the level of knowledge that did exist 2,000 years ago, more or less, right? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, the Alexandrian library was beyond our belief today. They were working on air flight. They were working on atoms. It was like Carl Sagan, who wrote Cosmos. He was so mad that it got burnt down because it put off space flight 1,000 years. Amazing. Because they were so close. And then it took the Middle Ages 1,000 years to recover. 1,500 approximately or 1476. Yeah, 476 became 1476. Just about when the Renaissance came about, and we went back and we continued. So it took us 500 years from 1476 to 1976 to have space flight and to have real advances in science, and so we lost 1,000 years. We would have conquered. We would have been living on Mars by now. Amazing. If we wanted to.
Yeah, amazing.
That's all. And then the one reason that the library was burnt, no one knows exactly, but some thought is that the people who were working there, the scholars, had become so arrogant in relation to the population, because they were so far ahead, and that the citizens burnt it down. There's a famous woman mathematician, I'm not sure her name was Sappho or not, I mix her up with the Greek poet, they made a film of this woman, in fact, it's on Netflix, but I forget her name. And even she was, they just talk rudely to people around them, and no one liked that. So it's a lesson to all academics. It's a lesson to all progressives who talk rudely to conservative college professors and students. It's going to backfire. You can't talk to people that way.
Well, the idea of a resentful population who puts in a leader who's not qualified, and the result is horrendous damage. I can't imagine that happening today. But
I didn't want to say it, but then that's not unrelated. I mean, it sprung Trump, who had this nation, were this nation not fighting so much like it is, he couldn't have come up.
Yeah. So he didn't cause it single-handedly or anything like that.
No, he's the result.
Yeah.
It's like a transition point. People go, "Oh my God," and maybe we better go back and be a little more civil. And that's how history goes. It moves forward, comes back, but we're repeating stuff from the past. There's nothing new, and there's nothing sophisticated about what we're doing, except in science.
Yeah, no, interesting. Well, I want to take a break for one quick moment and remind everyone, if you're watching or listening to this conversation, to this podcast episode, this is a San Francisco Conservative, the new podcast series. I'm Tom Martin, journalist and creative questioner, I guess you'd say. I love interviewing and meeting interesting people with thought-provoking ideas, and that's exactly what we're doing here, as you can tell, once again. And my co-host is author David Parker, joining us from San Francisco. David is the author of Income and Wealth, a San Francisco Conservative, and Rome 476, as we've just been discussing. Let's leap forward 1,000+ years and talk about, again, history that so many of us have forgotten, apparently, or maybe never knew. The founding of America, and what a precious idea democracy is, and what a precious document the Constitution is. Again, a lot of political leaders right now making promises right and left about what we're going to do for everyone, and kind of oblivious to the cost. As you said, we learned, there was a lesson to be found in Rome 476 with the destruction of that great civilization. But tell us, kind of walk us through some of those early ideas that you share with readers. I'd love to hear about them.
I like the connection you were kind of making. The fall of Rome destroyed a civilization, and you could say 1933, the New Deal, destroyed what the founding fathers gave to us. We reversed the notion of freedom from government to freedom with government. Government is our big brother friend, and we have a problem, government will bail us out, and we don't have to, responsibilities out the drain. Our founding father says that the government is, or I say it, it's my interpretation, is a neutral third party for protection of life, liberty, property, protection of social, political, economic freedom. We want a neutral third party. We want government for that purpose. Otherwise, you have people walking around with guns, taking the law into their own hands, walking around with private armies of samurai. There's plenty of countries where that's the case, and we don't do that here. And it means that people voluntarily behave and that they are self-responsible.
Well, looking back to, that we certainly don't want that. I totally agree with you there. Going back to the 1930s, some people might say that the nation needed Franklin Roosevelt because of the Great Depression, and that the WPA program and other programs that FDR instituted were much needed. It was a time of turmoil globally and so on. And what do you say to those people who say we needed FDR?
No one likes to say it like I say it, but FDR caused the Great Depression single-handedly. The stock market crashed in October 1928. By 1929, the Depression, 1929, 1930, 1931, 1932, a real depression. In 1933, the Depression was over. But Franklin Roosevelt, and you can look at any graph, whoop, the line came back up from the big black down below. It's clear. Franklin Roosevelt says, I ran for president in 1932 saying I'm going to do all these things, and by gosh, I'm going to do them. But by doing that, he reversed the Depression. And he reversed the return, the end of the Depression, and it went back for another 8 or 9 more years, more severe. And I'm not quite making that up. There are a lot of economists, maybe there's almost a consensus among economists that the government caused the Great Depression. Even Paul Krugman, who's paid to write as a progressive, but he's a Nobel economist nevertheless, he knows economic theory, he has also agreed that it didn't cure the Depression, it made it worse. And the Supreme Court in 1933, and again in 1934, said that the everything about the New Deal was completely unconstitutional. And in 1935, Roosevelt just got really tough. He says, I'm going to pad the Supreme Court. I'm going to add 6 more. They're going to rubber stamp everything I say. Checks and balances, democracy, throw it out. I am your new megalomania leader. You will do what I say. Roosevelt was in correspondence with Mussolini. They loved each other. And the Nazi newspapers in the time says, you can't believe it. The American president understands fascism. The community above the individual. He completely reversed what this nation is about. That's why some people in this nation don't like Franklin Roosevelt, even though he was a great man. Hitler was a great man, so was Stalin in some ways. Lenin was a great man in some ways. It's we reversed this country and now we can't get out of it. And the $33 trillion debt is one sign of that. And the way Congress fights with each other as extremists when in fact the nation is moderate is another sign. And Donald Trump is another sign that maybe this is catching up. And maybe if we reverse everything, every piece of legislation since 1933, all the rulings of the Warren Court, except civil rights. I'm a civil rights activist from the 60s. I can't reverse civil rights. But that's all. And that's all Martin Luther King asked for, and that's all Frederick Douglass asked for. Equal rights in front of the law, equal protection of the law, and nothing else. And we reversed it.
Yeah. Your essays, contained in all 3 of these volumes, the books that we've mentioned, the most recent one again is Rome 476. As you're writing these essays, it's very clear to me the level of research that you put into them and the meticulous effort and so on. I mean, there are a lot of footnotes, and if we can unpack these ideas, you're not just spouting off opinions like we were talking earlier about certain TV channels and TV networks, but it's meticulously researched. Do you have a certain reader in mind when you're writing these essays?
Actually, my editor, he's an Occupy Wall Street guy.
Wow.
And he says he would never edit someone like me. He says, but my examples are compelling. My ideas are compelling nevertheless, and I back them up so well that he can't just toss me out. I don't just make up proof of what some podcaster said or what some newspaper said one day. I used U.S. government statistics, the Congressional Budget Office, Bureau of Census, Department of Education. I only used real, uncontested facts and data. And so he says he can't just toss it off. And so he'll come back with, you can't say that, but that's fine. I decided that in my second book, A San Francisco Conservative, I dedicate to him. I said, I realize now it's to you who I've been writing all these years.
That's amazing. Do you think, I guess this is really hypothetical here, or maybe a fantasy, but do you think if we mailed copies of all 3 of your books to every legislator in Washington, maybe their eyes would open up a bit? Do you think there's any hope of that and kind of make them change their ways?
Probably not. I belong to the Cato Institute, and that's what they're doing. And all legislators do ask what Cato feels about every issue, because they're respected, and they document what they're talking about. The Brookings Institution is another institution that's more on the left, but they're serious and they back up everything they say. So I decided that the only people who are a little bit open to new ideas are first and second year college students, or juniors and seniors in high school, maybe at 18 to 22. So I'm donating my books at the moment, just to one institution called the Ashbrook Institution. And they teach teachers how to teach high school and college teachers how to teach American history by using the original core documents, not textbooks. Read the Constitution, read the Declaration, read all the great cases Read the Gettysburg Address. Read Frederick Douglass. Read all the great people. Read Martin Luther King, I Have a Dream speech. That's the right approach. And let students draw their own conclusions. And read little Dave Parker. They're using my books in their classroom now a little bit. That's the only audience who might take it seriously. An adult will say, but they're not going to change their mind.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, we're almost out of time. I'd love to keep it going one more minute and just hear you talk about this idea. It sounds like you're putting your faith in that younger generation that you just described. Do you think that those are the people, if they digest these ideas and really take
yes.
the lessons of history to heart, is there hope for the future? I mean, it's a troubled time on the planet, but what are your...
There is hope. It's my conservatism is not right-wing religion, right-wing gender, misogyny, none of that. I'm from San Francisco. That's why my title is strange. I'm only conservative with respect to the economy. With the budget, we shouldn't spend more. If we want to spend more, tax more. Tax the middle class 50 to 70% of what they make, because you can't tax the rich, they won't pay, and you can't tax the poor, they can't pay. If you put it that way, people might say, well, wait a second, maybe we shouldn't be spending so much. If I'm really paying for it, that's one of my big messages. The middle class pay all taxes.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, I once again enjoyed this conversation, opened my mind to some new ideas, as it always does. And I would just want to encourage our listeners and our viewers to be sure to visit your website, davidparkeressays.com. And you can find all three of David's books available for sale right there: Income and Wealth, A San Francisco Conservative, and Rome 476. Also find all three of those books available for sale on Amazon. Any closing words, David?
Well, my closing words were actually today's podcast, that there's historical examples for everything we think and do. And why don't we look at those? Why don't schools teach those? Why don't schools make all students read Pericles' funeral oration, which is in my San Francisco conservative book? The founding fathers must have read that, because, that is what we want for America. He says, we're open society. We know there's spies from other countries come here. Let them come. We have nothing to hide. The Russian spies used to come in the 70s and before the Cold War, and some FBI agents come up to them in front of the White House and says, you can just walk in. The Pentagon, this Freedom of Information Act. You don't have to be a spy. Everything you want is public, is here. It's free. You don't hide anything. That was a great thought.
Wow.
So everyone should read that. It's right out of Pericles. 500 BC.
Well, you're great. Your books are all kind of a portal to that time and those ideas and those chapters of history that we should all become familiar with. So it's always a pleasure. So thanks, David. I look forward to the next time. Thank you.
Next time. Great. Thanks, Tom.